Welcome to Silverdale Bond Fund Review H1 2020. We are living through extraordinary times, with each one of us creating history. The way we work, the way we live, and the way we socialize. When we did our first Zoom conference call a couple of years ago, many called to know what is Zoom, and very few attended it. Today, Zoom has become a verb. Zooming has enabled us to see each other more often and understand each other better. Thanks to each of you, you have been such a great support during these trying times. The worst is behind us. Our CIO mentioned this in a letter dated 1st April 2020. After every storm, there is a rainbow. In our CIO letter of 21st April, we had mentioned we could see the rainbow. Since then, we have delivered 20% absolute return to you. You have also received a special dividend of US dollar 2.1, as well received June 20 quarterly dividend of US dollar 2.1 per share, thus aggregating to US dollar 4.2 per share, right on track of our US dollar 8.4 per share dividend every year on year. Our current leverage YTM is at a very attractive level of 13.5% with a duration of just 1.8 years. Without much ado, may I request our CIO, Mr. Sanjay Goglani, to present to you our overview of the fixed income markets and how our Silverdale Bond Fund has performed in the first half of the year 2020. At the end of Sanjay's presentation, you will have the opportunity to ask questions and seek clarifications. As a matter of housekeeping, during the presentation, kindly keep yourself on mute. At any time, please feel free to fire your questions on chat or use the hand raise feature to indicate that you have a question. Thank you once again, and over to you, Sanjay.
Good day to you all. It's a pleasure and a privilege to address to you all. I've seen a lot of familiar faces and lots of familiar names. And thanks to, of course, COVID and the Zoom calls, which I have had the privilege of having with you over the last few months, that I've been able to see you and understand you much better. The cover of our presentation today reflects the blue sky ahead. I will, of course, quickly touch upon the storm behind us and the rainbow which we saw, and most importantly, what we did and what we intend to do in going forward. In my CIO letter of 9th of March, I had emphasized that we could have a problem, and I mentioned about the fear creating irrational actions. In the 17th March, I mentioned to you that we actually end up seeing a panic in the market. And this panic resulted into a dark functional market, forcing us to lock down the fund NAV to protect our investors. As shared by me in my CIO letter of 23rd March, fortunately, the maddening dash for cash was checkmated by the fast and furious response of the central bankers. Hence, I wrote on 1st of April that we saw in the Fed's unlimited QE a rainbow ahead of what we should be looking ahead in terms of our returns. I'm delighted to share that since the opening of the NAV lockdown, your fund has returned 20% absolute return, is exactly on the lines which we expected. To quote my 22nd April CIO letter, as per the Bloomberg intelligence report, every single credit route gives extraordinary returns. which is between typically 140% to 225% of the sell-off. As per JP Morgan, most of this return is achieved in the first 9 months. I believe this time we should receive the returns in about 6 odd months, given the fast response which we see in the central banks. Let me elaborate this a bit more. So if you would look a step back and step forward. So if you look in step back in terms of 2008-2009, the IG gave a negative return of roughly about 5%. In the next 12 months, it gave a return of close to 19%. The high yield was down by 35% and subsequently gave a return of 81%. However, if you just take the average, the COVID-19, where we saw the IG to be coming down by about 8%, should give you about 11% return. And the high yield, which came down by about 20%, should return roughly about 45%. As we stand today, approximately 2/3 of these returns have been achieved. But still, we have a long way to go. Very specifically, the yields are still elevated. Right? So this is from 2010 to date. And as you notice, the yields of the IG, which is being given here, is today about 174 as compared to 129, which was 12 months ago, and a median, of course, of 135. So that it basically shows that there is still a huge amount of spread compression potentiality, which we see in the market, specifically because of the fact that today the base pricing is close to zero, the Fed rates I'm referring to. For us, of course, it's initially beneficial because the borrowing cost has come down. Right? To look at the other way around, there was an inflow of roughly about $7 trillion in 7 weeks in 6 countries. Right? And in this, what happened with this huge amount of inflow was the credit spread, which blew out from 135 bips to 401 bips, came down to close to 60, sorry, it came down to about 150 bips in next 60 trading sessions. Right? So they are still pretty elevated despite the fast and furious and massive response given by the central banks. To put it other way, and this is very, very important, so let me go very specifically there. To put it other way, the credit default spreads which you are talking about embedded in the spread is much higher than the actual implied or actual default expected. To give you a flavor to you, IG spread of 154 implies a default rate of 13%. In a stress scenario, in the worst scenario, it's unlikely to go more than 2%. Okay. Just to remind you, even at the Great Depression of 1933, the default was 1.6%. Now you get a color of what I'm talking about. So the fact that you're being paid for potential default, which is higher, much higher, is a unique opportunity which we have in our lifetimes. Okay. Similarly, if you look in terms of high yield, a spread of about 617 bips means a default rate of 41%. In just to give a perspective to you, the highest default rate close to 2008-2009 was around 15%. We all know that the implied default rate is higher than the actual default rate. But this currently, we have almost differentially almost 3 times. Right? So having a spread default spread of almost 3 times means we have much better return in the coming days. And as I mentioned earlier, given that our cost of borrowing has come down, it means a much higher return for you as the investors. To put in, give an angle to you in terms of what was happening in the sector is this. In 2008, as you will recall, the credit rating agencies were sleeping at the steering. This time, they were very proactive. So the way they projected the defaults to happen was this, practically an exponential rise. And the market says, hold on, credit rating agencies, we have again got it wrong. The actual maximum default rate has already come down from there to close to right now roughly a year. And I can explain you this anecdotally first. So think of a company like Gap. 3 months ago, Gap was a crazy great to buy. Who on earth would go and buy a t-shirt in a lockdown? But having raised close to $2 billion in 3, 5, and 7 years paper means one thing for certain. COVID would not make Gap go bankrupt. And that's exactly what the central banks want. Companies should go bankrupt. Look in terms of Boeing. Boeing has raised $25 billion. That ensures that COVID cannot take Boeing into bankruptcy. That is exactly what the central banks want. So the actual default rate would be much lower than what was initially feared. This, in terms of giving color to you in terms of fundraising, is this. So if you notice, the fundraising we have done recent time is mind-blowing. The highest amount of fundraising done by IG issuers ever in the recorded history in a month is $290 billion in the month of April 2020. Second highest number, 258 billion in the month of March 2020. Third highest being 247 billion in the month of May 2020. $1 trillion have been raised to date as compared to less than $900 billion in the entire 2019. This massive inflows has ensured that the larger companies, the companies which we invest into, solid companies, the companies which we invest into, companies with the cash, the companies which we invest into have adequate and more liquidity to be able to survive this crisis. And of course, it's courtesy to friends like you, those are giving such massive inflows to the funds. More than $100 billion has flown in as retail money into various mutual funds. Roughly about 71 billion being into IG and 30 billion being into high yield. This is over and above more than 100 billion raised by specialist funds like Oaktree, KKR, Silver Lake, Lone Star, etc. This massive tsunami of water, like bigger than the tsunami which you see of water, in terms of the cash which we see in the companies, is what uplifting the larger companies. Let me clarify here. We are not expecting the COVID to disappear. We would have been surprised if there was not a second wave. Just to remind you, in most of the pandemic, the second wave is much more fatal than the first wave. In 1918 pandemic, for instance, more than 2/3 people died in the second wave, not in the first wave. So I'm not denying the human tragedy. I'm not denying the fact that large number of small companies would get bankrupt. I'm not denying the fact that the base of the pyramid, billions of people would be impacted. What I'm saying is that they will eventually, I would say, sadly, benefit the larger companies. The mom and pop store next to your house can go belly up, and you will see the Starbucks of the world taking its place. So after every single financial route, we see the bigger companies and the stronger companies become bigger and better. But in the process, there's huge amount of noise, and that's the best time to invest, because if you can find the signals in the noise, you can always make extraordinary profits. To put in one sentence, why we think the worst is behind us is because of A, the liquidity super squeeze being backstopped by the central banks, and B, because COVID is no more a surprise. This is the reason why we believe that the worst is already over as far as the credit market is concerned. To put in other words, credit markets typically bottom 6 months before the GDP bottoming out. So if you think the GDP is bottoming out in next 6 months, then you need to be sure that the credit has bottomed out. So from timing point of view, again, it is a great confluence where we see elevated spread, higher yields, and lower cost of borrowing, which directly benefits our fund. Taking to the fund specifically, let me now take you through the performance. We will be talking about the first half of 2020 going forward, but just to give you a big picture in terms of the trailing 12 months, we are down by about 10% after paying dividend of roughly 8%. There has been a marginal increase in the AUM. Our AUM up by about 10% as compared to June 2019, from about 180 million to about 119 million. And of course, if you consider the dividend payout, which is close to about $12 million, our net AUM today in June 2020, 26 June to be precise, was 179 million. Coming to the more specific, in the first half of this year, we have delivered about 13% negative return. It's mainly driven in terms of the bond prices depreciation. And as I mentioned to you, this dislocation is wonderful because you should make about 142 to 25% return of the downtick. So we think it's a good sign in terms of what returns we should expect going forward. Of course, there has been a carry increase, definitely yes. But more important, equally important is the fact that our cost of borrowing has come down significantly to be close to a little less than about 0.83%. We have maintained our dividend. We paid you a special dividend of $2.10 and followed by the June quarter dividend of $2.10, thus aggregating to $4.20 per share for the first half of 2020. We are fairly confident we should be able to maintain this rate of dividend payment. Over the past 6-7 years, we have delivered you about 8% compound return as compared to the Bloomberg Emerging Market US dollar corporate bond index 1 to 3 years, which is given about 4% return. So we're given almost 100% higher than the index. In terms of returns post lockdown, since April 2020, we have given you about close to 19.86% return as compared to just 3.4% return of Bloomberg Emerging Market US Dollar Corporate Index 1 to 3 years. That demonstrates the quality of our portfolio and which specifically shows to you that the reason for the NAV drop was not a problem with the portfolio. Now I'm confirming to you in so many words that we didn't have a single default in our portfolio. It was entirely because of the dysfunctional market. So as the panic is giving way to flight to safety, we are seeing increasingly better returns for us. In terms of the geographical spread, for the rating spreads, we continue to be high grade bond fund. You are aware that typically to be a IG fund, you need to be 60-65% into investment grade bonds. We are typically close to 75% into investment grade bonds. Currently, we are marginally lower at 72, is simply because of the outperformance of high yield relative to IG, which we have seen in the last couple of months, or the last few weeks, and over a period of time, of course, in the next couple of weeks, it will get much in line with our targeted 75% IG. Now, this is very important to keep in mind, specifically in the current era of COVID, that as I mentioned to you, the larger companies, the better quality companies would stand to gain at the cost of the poor quality companies. Therefore, this strategy would see you very, very well in this era of uncertainty. Just to remind you once again to you, we are aware fund managers, when we talk about credit rating of our underlying portfolio, we're talking about rating as validated by S&P, Moody's, or Fitch only, and not internal rating or local rating in the various countries. Again, a ring of assurance to you in terms of the quality of the portfolio which we run. In terms of duration, our duration is about 1.8 years. Again, we keep the duration to be low. In terms of changes, no great changes. Marginal decrease in the 0 to 1 year bracket, simply because of the fact that at the time of the March-April, we were able to create a liquidity by selling some of the bonds which are maturing in next week, 2 week, a month or so. Marginal increase in 1 to 2 year, that has been deliberate because we wanted to be in the short run and we see a lot of juice there. In terms of 2 to 3 years, is almost same, etc. The interesting thing, of course, as usual, is our geographical spread. We are much more diversified now. We have about 126 securities in 26 countries. The notable change is, of course, India, which you see has increased by almost 7% from 12% earlier to close to about 19% now. Just to remind you, in principle, we do not like India because Indian credits are relatively tight in the normal circumstances and the issue size are very small. But thanks to the COVID, thanks to the noise around COVID, we see huge amount of value in India. And I should also admit that part of the return is simply because of the outperformance of Indian credits in the last couple of months. It's not that we've been aggressively buying India. We didn't sell India, of course. It's more because of the fact that they've done extremely well in the post-COVID zone. In terms of the South Africa, the reason it has gone away is principally because of the fact that the key holding we had in South Africa, namely Anglo Gold, has been reclassified by Bloomberg from South Africa to be in Australia. It's a pure classification and nothing to write home about. Qatar, again, the key reason is that some of the holding of Qatar, which we had, we sold in the March-April time, simply because they're quoting close to the par and being high quality, A-rated securities. It gives good amount of cash to us, which is critically important at the juncture of time. Nothing in particular to be working across out there. In terms of others, which has gone hugely up, I see that from 14% to 20%. These include countries, or 17 countries, which includes Canada, Transnistria, Colombia, Oceania, Mexico, Pemex, Great Britain, Germany, Hong Kong, Russia, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Singapore, Malaysia, Australia, which we talked about, South Africa, and Qatar. So again, very extremely well spread in terms of the geographical distribution. Again, sectorally, we see some values which are investing into across out there. Many of you typically ask us in our leverage, which we are sharing with you every week, but I thought it would be good to do a quick catch up to point out to you that leverage which we have today is still marginally lower than what we had about 6 months ago. Just to remind you, we got down leverage very significantly in the month of March and April at the time of heightened volatility. So we are close to where we started from. And as usual, we have more than adequate headrooms available to us. This is the mother slide, as I like to put it across out there. It just gives you a return which we have been delivering to you. We are first time also making easy for you to compute the year-on-year return. So for example, if you were to have invested in our fund on 1st of January 2014 and exited on 31st of December 2019, you have made about 61% return. Likewise, if you invested in 2015 and exited in 2017, you made about 40% return. This gives you a much better color in terms of what sort of returns you have been getting into the fund. And as you always maintained, that it's practically impossible for you not to make money by being in a fund for 3 years, and it's clearly well detailed from the chart on the screen. In terms of monthly returns, 67% of months we have given you a positive return. And this, of course, are monthly returns given to you. 2020, of course, was the best of the times and the worst of the times. Interestingly, the 6 months of the first half of the year contained 2 of the worst months for Silverale and 2 of the best months for Silverale, which, as you can see, comes out here. Importantly, we always been maintaining a dividend for your benefit. We are continuing to be a consistent high dividend paying fund. We have maintained the $2.10 dividend, which we have been maintaining for your benefit, and we are fairly confident we should be able to give the same returns to you going forward. The other thing which I want to highlight from this chart is the return profile. So what I want to highlight there is the fact that when we see elevated yields, we have seen that typically the following period has a fantastic return. So for example, if you look in terms of 2016 end, when the yields were about 9%, the 2017 returns were close to about 9%. Similarly, in 2018, when the yields were close to about 11.65%, the underlying return for the year was roughly about 11.9, roughly 12% return. So the key takeaway to you is that the high yields typically indicate a good return in the subsequent period. And just to conclude this point, currently we are at close to about 13% YTM, which again points to a bright future ahead for the fund returns. In terms of the more nuanced return, and as you know, it's something which we share with you every single week. This is the part of the Communique, the fact sheet which we share with you. We give you the typical bond analytics every week. In terms of top holding, as you notice, most of the companies are very, very familiar to you. Citadel is one of the largest fund managers in the world. To remind you, we have given money to the fund manager and not to the fund. Samvardhana, one of the largest auto ancillary producers in Europe. Braskem, one of the third largest producer of polypropylene in the world. IndusInd Bank, one of the largest private sector banks. BNP Paribas, one of the largest banks in France. UPL, one of the largest agrochemicals producer. Chang, one of the largest developer in China. Blue Star, ChemChina, no requires any introduction there. Aroundtown, one of the largest in Germany. And DNB, one of the safest and largest bank in the world, being the biggest bank in Norway. Norway, as you remember, is one of the largest sovereign fund in the world with more than $1 trillion with them, and they are people those who own the DNB bank. To summarize, we are back on track in terms of our performance. The year-to-date return has been negative 13%, primarily because of the MTM losses. Going forward, the pull to par and the higher carry because of lower borrowing shall deliver you a post lockdown NAV to be much superior than what you saw earlier. You know, since April 2020, we have given 20% return to you versus 3.4% return by the Bloomberg EM index, and typically 2 to 10% given by the other funds. What I want to highlight this point of time is not only the fact that our return is significantly higher than the peer group, but also to highlight the dispersion we are seeing in the market. At the times of noise, active management is something which will always outperform. Right? At this time when the severity of the analysis is seen and something which we can observe and we can benefit from. It's very important to keep that in mind. Importantly, neither at the time of the lockdown, before the lockdown, or after the NAV lockdown did we have any strategy drift. We continue to be very well diversified, continue to be in IG in terms of short duration, and we are continuing to be maintaining a prudent level of leverage. You, as investors, continue to benefit from our economies of scale across the board. We have, and I share with you very humbly and very proudly, we have established our position in the Singapore market to be one of the best connected fund house. At the time, the peak of the March, April, we were one of the few fund houses, those who could source liquidity, and therefore, we could be able to safeguard your assets much better. And that's a point which people have now put on record. So we have now emails from the banks, etc., confirming that yes, our sourcing ability is even better than many of the banks. Very proud of it, and thank you very much for your support. We have maintained the dividend run rate of $8.40 per annum per share, and think we believe we should be able to continue to do it. In summary, we're talking about a fund with the leverage YTM of close to 13%, duration of just 1.85 years, which ensures you a good, higher risk-adjusted return in the coming quarters. Before I conclude, let me just highlight to you, we continue to be extremely cognizant of the risk in the market. We have some of the cutting edge tools in terms of risk management. We're monitoring close to about 50 parameters on each bond. Thanks to the learnings from the March and April, we have further enhanced our risk management protocols. We have introduced further liquidity cushions effect out there. We are introducing further hedges effect out there, and making it much more robust going forward. Because of the fact that while we believe majority of returns will come in next 6 months or odd, the COVID problem and the impact of it would be seen for at least a decade to come. Therefore, next 2 to 3 years becomes critically important in terms of managing the risk. So the days of tourist investors, the days of armchair investors, the day of trend following are numbered, if not dead altogether. And risk management becomes critically important. And that's something which we are very proud of. And you've seen our performance in the most volatile period of March and April. To conclude, we continue to be on track to give you about 8 to 10% return per annum in the long term. We continue to have potential leverage from multiple lenders taken by the fund and not by the investor. So there's no question of you getting margin call. And now, of course, I need not repeat it because you have seen that if you did get a margin call in the month of March, April, obviously, the fund is absolutely cautious. We have zero defaults in underlying portfolio, and partly because of the fact that we are very, very strict in terms of our research. Just to share with you, we have doubled up our team strength over last year and a half, further to enhance our capability to much deeper dive research for your benefit. Importantly, the market is pricing in much higher default than the actual defaults, and therefore it's a fantastic opportunity to benefit from the market position. We never got a margin call. We keep 5-10% headrooms with us. We are high quality fund. Currently 72% is IG, low duration of 1.85 years, well diversified 126 securities, with maximum exposure to be less than 3% for a single name. We don't take any non-USD exposure. We continue to pay you $8.40 per annum income dividend. Our cash flow modeling has given us 9 upgrades to buybacks this year, as compared to 17 last year. Just to give color to you, in normal market, we typically get 15 to 20% buybacks of credit enhancement every year. Of course, the year to date is minus 13%. Post April, we have given you 20% return. In summary, we're talking about an open-ended fund, high quality fund, paying you $8.40 as dividend, and currently having a higher yield of 13% with a lower cost of borrowing, and hence a very bright future going forward. Before I conclude, let me thank our investors from various institutions, those who have been very supportive to us. We are grateful to you all. Thanks to various platforms which have supported our fund, and we are going to enhance our relationship in coming months. And of course, to various analysts and the databases which cover us. We have more than 17 of those being with us, right from Bloomberg, Barclays, Hedge, to all the way to Morningstar, Perking, and Eureka Hedge. Thank you to all of you. Before I formally say thank you to you and take the questions, I want to share with you a fantastic news for your benefit. And the news is the fact that we would be redomiciling the assets of the fund to Singapore in the coming months. Singapore, as you know, is much more coveted jurisdiction, which will give you enhanced comfort of our systems being there, the comfort of Monetary Authority of Singapore being there with the fund as a regulator, and we will be sharing about the details in the coming months. And I will solicit your consent to move your holdings from Cayman to Singapore. More of which we'll share with you in the coming months. That's all I have to share with you in terms of basic performance. I'm happy to take questions, please. Okay, so I've seen lots of questions. So in no particular order, I try to cover the questions which are more generic first, so that benefits the people. The question is, can you please shed more light on Indian exposure and if you are being compensated for holding this name considering the spread of virus and unlikely case of containing the virus? Okay, the answer is this. Yes, we are comfortable in terms of holding our Indian crates. We are monitoring the position very closely. The good news is that most of the names which we hold, we are able to get the monthly collection figures, so which we are monitoring on a month-to-month basis. I'm positively surprised with the numbers which I've got for the month of June. We have seen the collection to be roughly around 70% plus in many of the cases. Something Muthoot, of course, has been fantastic. We have heard as 80-90%, but in case of Shriram, for example, is on 70% plus, which is fantastic. What is expectation on July is that we close to normalcy for Shriram. So looks very good. In terms of your names, which you talked about, what are the names which you hold in India? Our maximum holding, as you know, is in terms of the IndusInd Bank UPL, the two names which come in the top 10. Besides that, we have Vedanta, as you're aware of it. We have a bit of India Infoline, Manippuram Finance. These are bigger things, basic things to sector. I think the biggest for take you is the IndusInd and the UPL. The next question is in terms of dividend payment. Okay, let me see if I can phrase the question. The question is that in terms of sustainability of dividend and how does it impact the investor? Well, like in case of any fund in the universe, whenever the dividend is paid, your NAV will follow with the amount of dividend. That's cast in stone. Nobody can change. That's fully understandable and workable. There are two aspects the way to look across it to it is, if you're talking in terms of my ability to pay dividend in terms of cash flow, I think it's a no-brainer. We're talking about underlying bonds giving you a coupon of more than 5%, and given I'm leverage about 1.2 times, we're talking about roughly 11-12% cash inflow. Against 11-12% cash inflow, if I'm paying you 8%, it is immensely workable and manageable. Yeah, I would say that look, half the investors prefer to take a accumulation or a growth class, as they call it. Fully understandable. So if you feel that by paying dividend you are getting denied the opportunity to earn more money, I would tend to agree with you, and will welcome you to convert your dividend payouts into a growth scheme. In terms of the preference, it's up to you. We are agnostic to what you do. We thank you for your support. I don't understand the question. The question is that there are USG shortage globally, and hence the swap lines initiated by Fed with US allies. What about countries not in receipt of the swap lines? How does it impact the corporate countries that are not in receipt of the US swap lines? Well, it's a very complicated topic to discuss in our conference call. But let me clarify to you that many of these swap lines have already ended. Right? The swap lines were given typically for the period of 60 days, which is ended in most of the things. Having said that, the non-Fed swap lines, namely the private markets swap lines, are already open and pretty liquid. So I don't see issue per se in terms of dollar being under shortage. So I don't think there should be a big consideration there. Your other question is in terms of what happens to countries that don't have US swap lines. There are many mechanisms. Again, this is not foreign to go in detail, but I just give a pointer to you, which is in terms of the LDRs. by the World Bank. So the SGRs are a classic instrument in terms of taking care of any emergency requirements or so. The question is that risk of default in coming years. I've already covered that, I thought, in detail, but let me see if I can give you something more. So if you want to know the default risk, as I mentioned, would increase. I'm not denying that. The point is that default increasing for whom? So if the default increasing for example, triple Cs, absolutely yes. We don't see any any other way. But if you are looking in terms of the in IG, the answer is no. Okay, let me see if I can get you some numbers to you in terms of default. So again, the big picture number is this. The typical default rates in 1981 to 2018 for IG was 0.90%. The highest at the time of 1933 Great Recession was 1.6%. Under the current situation in terms of COVID, the stress position is about 2%. The implied default rate is close to about 12%. Therefore, you're still safe and dry in terms of the default rates. Here is the number for your benefit. So these are default rates since 1981 to 2018. Okay, and then let me also give you in terms of okay, let me take you to this slide which I showed you earlier. So what I want to highlight here is the fact that while default rate have increased, the growth of default rate is coming down. Right? If you notice carefully, last 4 to 5 weeks, actually we have seen the numbers of companies being under credit negative watch has come down, not gone up. Something which most of people are not even observing, but very important to keep those things in your mind when we talk about the default rates. These are okay. This is what I was looking for. So this is giving you color in terms of high yield, because see, IG, default should not be there. What I want to highlight to you in terms of high yield also, the default rate are more at the lower end of the spectrum, namely in terms of the triple C's portion of it. And again, same reason as in case of IG, primarily because of the fact that the fundraising is at the historic high. Right? So the ability for the high yield issuers to be able to raise money itself is a fantastic proposition to be in. What could be the impact of the fund of the second wave if that comes through? Well, second wave is 100% guaranteed. Apologies, but I don't see any other way. To be honest with you, I would be surprised if there is not even a third wave. I think third wave should also come. What will happen? Nothing. See, if you have a second wave, it will create more noise, and whenever the noise is there, it is a stock pickers delight. So that will enable us to be able to pick up bonds at a much better spread than they would otherwise be available. So I don't see any issue for that. Question from Arman. Okay, there must have been leverage on non-investment grade bonds, which may have reduced due to heightened risk and margin calls. Did this happen? This will impact performance in terms of ability to hold and leverage. Yes and no. So given the size of the portfolio which we run, and equally important, given the size of the relationship which we have with various lenders, for us it works a bit differently. So typically we do get extra leverage, which we typically won't count or use, but in times of stress, those things are very, very important. So let me confirm to you that all of our lenders were very, very cooperative, and we are grateful to them, all of them, whether it's Credit Suisse or Belgilis or whatever. We got a zero margin calls from them, and they were very, very practical in terms of understanding that for a brief period of couple of weeks, the market was dysfunctional. They did not cut the LV for us. And in terms of the LV changing, that's part and parcel of our business. I don't think it makes too much difference. See, if you are running a portfolio with 126 bonds, one bond LV going up by 5%, coming down by 5%, would not really make any material difference in terms of managing the portfolio. So overall, no, it didn't impact us in terms of the fact that the realignment of LVs did take place. But to clarify your specific point, at least in the month of March, April, we did not see any of our lenders reducing the LV dramatically or removing altogether whatsoever. Are the corporations raising funds to cover debts? Are we seeing a Ponzi scheme here? The answer is no, and I tell you why. Because this is a very wide-running myth in the market. Let me share this slide with you, which is that leverage across the board is increasing. Leverage is increasing, no doubt, but it's not across the board. This slide which explains to you in terms of the interest coverage. So what has happened is that because of the low cost of borrowing, the interest coverage anyway has improved. But over and above it, the fact that the last few years the corporations have been able to increase the EBITDA margin in relative to the debt also has improved the ability of the various issuers to be able to service the bonds. So overall, no, I don't think it's a Ponzi scheme. Of course, there will be exceptions. I'm not denying that. But in terms of the quality of the portfolio which we are running, no, we don't see a big issue there. Any other questions? Happy to take.
I think Shantanu has a question.
Hi,
Go ahead.
Yeah, hi Sanjay. Thanks for the call. My question pertains to leverage levels in the fund. I see the current leverage is around 1.3 times. And in the presentation, you mentioned that the return expectation over next 6 to 9 months will largely be from the pullback. And the second point you mentioned was that now the cost of funds, cost of borrowing is very, very low. So what can we expect in terms of leverage levels? Will it be around same levels, or you would be going ahead increasing it? If you can put some color on that.
Thanks, Shantanu, and thanks for your support. In terms of leverage, we don't see any material change happening across out there. I don't think we are being aggressive or being there. I think we have more than adequate headroom. For us, there are two very important things which we keep in mind. The first is volatility, right? We expect the June results to be pretty bad. We expect to be worse than the market is expecting. And the negative sentiments of equity would have a follow-on impact on the fund. So we are expecting a big increase in volatility in the coming months. So we would be slightly more chary in terms of increasing our leverage. But the key thing to us would always be the volatility of the underlying portfolio. Second is that, in terms of the leverage quantum, I don't think that really is something which we need to worry much about it. I would like to give Saili one more very important fact, which I may have not highlighted sufficiently. Yes, we are expecting to pull to par. I think it should give at least 10 to 15% return because pull to par is value itself. But equally important is we are expecting further tightening of the market. Now, of course, let me see if I can give you some color to here. So we are talking about tightening across the board, both in terms of high yield as well as in terms of IG. So I'm giving you a number. This is from Citibank, of course, but gives you a color to you in terms of return expectations and how it works across. So the Citi is expecting the tightening to for the high yield. I'm talking about Asian high yield because this is an Asian IG. These are two things which we are more focused upon. So you're talking about tightening about 40 bips in terms of IG and about 100 bips in terms of high yield. They are also expecting increase in the US Treasury cost, just to highlight to you. And after considering the increase in the US Treasury rates, they are expecting a return of 1.8% for IG and 6.8% for high yield for the second half of the year. So you remind you, this is an absolute return for the second half. And we are leveraged. So obviously our return will be much better than the returns. So take away to you 2 points. Point number one, no, in terms of leverage, we don't expect any significant increase or decrease. Number two is that the return going forward will be coming not only from pull to par, which is of course very important, not denial on that, but also from spread tightening as we see it.
Okay, thanks.
Shadu, I can't hear you. Yeah, fine.
Yeah, my second question was returning the pullback. I couldn't catch the number. You said the pullback would result in 10% return for the fund. Is that correct?
Yeah, around that.
Okay, this is leverage return you were talking about.
Correct.
Okay. Will you be able to give color as to, say, out of, say, whatever 128 securities, how many of them would be trading below par at the moment?
I don't have the numbers with me off the cuff, but given that our YTM is elevated by definition, there will be material number there. Give me a second. Let me see if I can give you some color. Okay, so if you look in terms of my YTM is close to about 6.2%, 6.19% here, right? So if you take a YTM of 6% here, so it basically means like roughly about 3-4% of my portfolio should be below par, because that's the only way mathematically come across out there. And look other way around also, because if it's down by that, then 4 into 2, 8 and 9, yeah, approximately that. That's approximate number.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Sanjay.
Welcome.
Hi, Sanjay. Peter Ryan Kane from Perk Advisory. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. Hope you're surviving. I just wanted to ask you, I guess, a two-sided question a little bit. Given yields have obviously risen, as you've just been discussing, par value or the mark-to-market value of some of the assets have fallen as you'd expect. Given that obviously nobody can predict what the next 6 or 12 months of COVID really mean, given your fund is now returning materially higher yields and well above the sort of target dividend that you're looking for, would you consider actually fairly significantly decreasing the credit risk exposure? Because you actually don't need to run the level of risk you're running and generate the sort of return you're generating on a forward-looking basis. I realise you're -20 year to date, but on a forward-looking basis, you don't necessarily need to run that level of risk going into a world that none of us can predict. It just feels different to me, Sanjay, than a 2008 or any other kind of specific event where you can identify the causality. It just feels a little different.
Okay, so let me see if I can address that. The reason why we are fairly confident about the pool to par effect for us is simply because our duration is very small, right? We are talking about 1.85%, 1.85 years duration. So it's fairly small, and we also know 1/3 of the bonds have a duration of 0 to 1 year, roughly about 25% plus is in the range of 1 to 2 years. So therefore, we are fairly confident in terms of return which we will get from pool to par. In terms of the risk level which we are running, I think we are pretty conservative in our risk, and that's for 3 reasons. Reason number 1 is because of the fact that we have IG, which is typically around 75%, currently around 72%. So if your question is that would it be coming back to 75% into IG, I'll say absolutely yes. So to that extent, yes, we would reduce the potential risk there. Number 2 is that our duration is 1.85 years. As you know, most of the indices have a duration of about 5 to 7 years. Even if you look in terms of JAXI, the duration is close to about 5.13 years currently. So we think we are pretty conservative there. Number 3 is we are again very extremely diversified, and the amount of leverage we take is much lower than potentially leverage which we can take. If I were to go and use my extra leeway given by the lenders to me in terms of the top-up leverage, I can easily get minimum 5 to 10% more leverage. It basically means my headroom will be almost a little less than 20%. Right. So to the extent that the fact that we are happy to run the leverage which we have and still keep a headroom of 8 to 10%, I think we have been fairly conservative. So we do not see per se much risk in that sense of the word. Yes, we are deeply cognizant of the point you are talking about, the uncertainties going forward, and that's the reason why we have always stuck to companies which have good cash flow available to them. That's our religion, to make sure that companies have real fungible cash to be able to honor the maturity proceeds as they come to maturity. Does it answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thanks, Sanjay. It's good color. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? I think, Sanjay, we've covered most of the questions, if not all. With that, thank you all. You have all been such a great sport for what was fairly longish presentation today. This demonstrates your support to our fund and our commitment to you. Should you seek any further information, we'll just chat away. Keep in touch and look forward to sharing the great news soon. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to address you all, and once again, much appreciate your support.